Sylas looks broken, but that's not why people lose on him. Most Sylas players don't lose because they can't combo. They lose because they don't understand tempo. If you're constantly fishing for hooks, forcing all-ins, or flipping early skirmishes, you're already playing him wrong. Sylas doesn't win by diving first. He wins by choosing the right fight and turning it instantly. In this guide, I'll show you how to make Sylas consistent, without coin flipping early fights or relying on miracle ult steals. I've also included a Hijack Mastery section, so you know exactly how to use every ultimate you steal. Let's get into it. Let's quickly lock in what Sylas brings to the table. Sylas thrives in short explosive trades, using layered abilities and passive autos to deal heavy damage inside tight cooldown windows, rather than relying on slow extended DPS. With Hijack, Sylas can steal and repurpose enemy ultimates, allowing him to shift roles mid-game and turn fights using the strongest tool available on the map. Sylas' Kingslayer gives him powerful in-combat healing, letting him survive burst, outlast opponents in skirmishes, and swing fights that would otherwise be losing. Double dashes and aggressive repositioning tools allow Sylas to close gaps, dodge key abilities, and access backline targets that most AP champions cannot reach. With reliable engage angles and the ability to steal high impact ultimates, Sylas can force picks or instantly flip teamfights with decisive execution. But that power comes with real risks, so let's break down Sylas' weaknesses. Sylas' impact often depends on the quality and timing of stolen ultimates, meaning poor ult choices or weak enemy options can significantly lower his influence in fights. Sylas must fully commit to fights to deal damage, and once he goes in, escaping without cooldowns is extremely difficult. In the early levels, Sylas can struggle to control the wave or trade safely, often needing patience before he reaches his first real power spikes. Sylas becomes overwhelming when ahead, but if he falls behind, his engage-heavy playstyle and melee range make it much harder to recover safely. Against long-range champions, Sylas can struggle to access fights or farm comfortably without taking significant poke damage. Those are Sylas' biggest strengths and weaknesses overall. This passive is what turns Sylas from a spellcaster into a real skirmisher. After casting an ability, Sylas empowers his next basic auto, causing it to swing in an area and deal bonus magic damage around the target. Most players spam abilities and forget to weave autos, cutting their damage nearly in half during trades. Sylas' abilities hit hard, but his passive is what makes his damage spike. If you ignore your passive charges, you're leaving guaranteed damage on the table. Petricite Burst gives Sylas a strong AoE wave clear once he can step up, letting him quickly shove and reset the lane when needed. Empowered autos hit towers too, so if your opponent roams or leaves lane, Sylas can quickly cash in on plates and pressure. If you treat your passive as a core damage source instead of a bonus effect, Sylas becomes far more consistent in skirmishes. This ability defines how Sylas survives lane and sets up his damage. Chain Leash lashes in an area that detonates shortly after, dealing bonus damage in the center and slowing enemies hit. Most players land the first lash but miss the second explosion, losing the majority of Q's damage. The second detonation is the real threat, and it's easy to dodge if you throw it carelessly. Increase your accuracy by using Q in predictable windows. Aim Q when enemies go for CS. Last hitting creates a brief moment where they stand still, making the explosion much harder to avoid. After landing E2, drop Q immediately to guarantee the center detonation while they're knocked up. When enemies are running directly away from you, their movement becomes predictable. Place the detonation slightly ahead of their path to catch the second explosion. Q is your only reliable ranged poke tool in lane. Use it to harass from distance, and secure CS when walking up would cost too much health. The explosion animation reveals if something was hit in Fog of War. You can safely check brushes or jungle camps by watching for the detonation effect. Both parts of Q deal AoE damage, so aim to hit as many minions as possible when they're bunched up to clear waves efficiently. If you treat Q as a setup and control tool instead of just damage, Sylas' lane becomes far more stable. This ability decides whether Sylas wins trades or throws them away. Kingslayer dashes to a target, dealing burst damage and healing Sylas on impact. Most players use W at the start of their combo, rushing the damage and wasting its full potential. W heals significantly more the lower your health is, so using it towards the end of a trade not only maximizes sustain, but also lets you stick to retreating targets and finish the fight. Kingslayer can dash over thin jungle walls, towers, and inhibs if the target is on the other side, giving Sylas unexpected escape and chase angles. Later on with ability haste, the cooldown becomes very short, letting you use it repeatedly in fights and apply constant pressure. Because of this, W often catches enemies off guard. Players think they can finish you, only for Sylas to heal, stall, and turn the fight completely. If you time Kingslayer correctly, Sylas becomes far harder to outlast than most opponents expect. This ability decides whether Sylas actually reaches his target or gets left behind. Sylas first dashes a short distance, then throws out a chain that pulls him to the first enemy hit, knocking them up on impact. One of the biggest mistakes with E is throwing the chain immediately and hoping it lands. Use the first dash to read how the enemy reacts, then place the chain where they're likely to dodge instead of where they are. The first dash can also be used to dodge skill shots before firing the chain to re-engage. Sometimes you can simply run at the enemies or use W to close the gap first, and then fire E once you're in range. Both parts of E trigger your passive, giving you 2 empowered autos, which makes it especially strong for quick trades and early level skirmishes. The first dash can cross many thin walls on the map, giving Sylas quick escape or repositioning options. If there's a target on the other side, the chain pull can even drag you across thicker terrain by grabbing jungle camps or enemies through the wall. If you're going to master one basic Sylas ability, it's this one. Landing E lets Sylas stick to targets and chain his full combo, but once it connects, you're fully committed, which is what makes Sylas both extremely dangerous and vulnerable at the same time. This is one of the most game-changing ultimates in all of League of Legends. Hijack lets Sylas steal an enemy champion's ultimate and cast it as his own. The biggest mistake with Hijack is stealing the wrong ultimate at the wrong time. Always think about the next fight before you steal. The right ultimate at the right moment can completely decide the outcome. Look for engage ultimates first. Abilities like Malphite, Amumu, or Sejuani can instantly start fights and give Sylas powerful team fight initiation. Defensive ultimates can keep you alive in difficult fights. Tools that provide shields, healing, or damage reduction can buy time and help Sylas survive long enough to turn the fight. Single target abilities are strong for picks and skirmishes. Abilities designed for dueling can help Sylas quickly eliminate isolated targets. Be careful with ultimates that scale with AD. Since Sylas builds ability power, some stolen ultimates can feel much weaker if they rely heavily on attack damage scaling. Max W first. It's Sylas' most reliable damage and sustain for winning trades. Max E second. Lowering the cooldown lets you look for engages and catches more often. Max Q last. Its damage relies on landing the delayed explosion, which isn't always guaranteed. Put points into R whenever available. You can even put a few points in Q first, or even max it for safe and poke and wave control. This is Sylas' strongest level 1 trade in many matchups. Start by dashing forward with E and landing the chain. Each part of E gives a passive stack, letting you immediately follow up with empowered auto attacks. That means a simple E into autos can outtrade many champions right at level 1. If you're running Electrocute, this also makes it very easy to proc it early and win the trade. E, then E, followed by auto attacks anytime in between or after. This is Sylas' most reliable trade combo, and it's how you win most early skirmishes. Start by dashing forward with E and landing the chain. The knockup guarantees the second part of Q, so you can get the full damage while they're crowd controlled. From there, weave in your passive autos while they're trying to escape, and save W for the very end of the trade. Using W last lets you stick to the target as they move away, and the lower your health is, the more healing you get from it. Executed properly, the combo gives Sylas multiple passive procs and a very strong extended trade. E, E, Q, W, followed by auto attacks. This combo helps you reach enemies who are hiding behind minions or constantly dodging your chain. Start by dashing forward with E, then use W to close the remaining distance and get directly on top of the target. From there, you can line up the second part of E and follow up with Q if it connects. After that, weave in remaining passive autos as the enemy tries to escape. E, W, E, Q. This combo is for landing E2 against enemies who are hard to catch. Dash forward with E, then Q to apply the slow. You're giving up the perfect E2 Q setup, but in return, the slow makes your chain land much more reliably. Once E2 connects, weave in your passive autos and finish the trade with W. E, Q, E, W. This trade is useful against champions you don't want to fully commit into or when fighting near enemy towers. Dash in with W to get quick damage and healing, then immediately use E to disengage before the enemy can punish you. You can add an auto attack if there's time, and throw out Q while retreating to slow the enemy and make it harder for them to chase. It's a simple way to make a small trade, recover health, and safely reset the fight. W, E, Q. This is the default way to use Stolen Engage or CC ultimates. Use the Stolen ultimate first to lock a target down or start the fight, then immediately follow with your normal combo while they can't dodge your chain. This turns your ultimate into guaranteed setup for E2. And once E2 lands, the rest of Sylas's damage becomes much easier to finish. R, E, E, Q, W. Use your normal combo first, then hold the Stolen ultimate until the enemy tries to escape or flash away. Some ultimates are far more effective this way, especially long range or execution style abilities. For example, Vega's ultimate deals more damage the lower enemy's health is, making it much stronger as a finisher than an opener. E, E, Q, W, R. These are your core combos. Lock them in. Conqueror is the most consistent choice on Sylas. His kit naturally stacks it extremely fast. You're weaving abilities with empowered auto attacks from your passive, so hitting full stacks in fights is very easy. Once it's active, you gain extra damage and healing, which makes Sylas much stronger in extended skirmishes. Electrocute is the alternative when you want stronger burst trades early in lane, and especially against squishier teams. It helps you chunk targets quickly in lane and during picks. The downside is that it falls off against tanks or bruisers, so if the enemy team is fairly durable, Conqueror will almost always be the better rune. Start with Doran's Ring and 2 health potions. This gives Sylas everything he needs early: mana sustain, ability power, and a bit of health to survive laning trades. Your first major item is Hextech Proto Belt. This item is perfect for Sylas because it gives burst damage, mobility, and wave clear, helping you stick to targets or start fights. After Proto Belt, your standard core build looks like this: Sorcerer's Shoes and Shadow Flame or Riftmaker. Shadow Flame is the strongest damage spike, especially against squishier teams. Riftmaker on the other hand gives sustain and durability, which can be better for longer fights or against bruisers. Sylas is actually one of the few champions where all 4 boots are viable. Sorcery Shoes are the default option for the extra magic penetration and burst damage. Ionian boots are a great budget option, providing ability haste for lower cooldowns. Mercury treads are strong against heavy AP or crowd control teams. And plated steel caps are the best choice against heavy AD compositions. If you're ever unsure, just default to Sorcerer's Shoes. After your core build, you have several strong options. Zhonya's Hourglass is one of the best Sylas items. It lets you dive into fights, absorb pressure, then stasis while your cooldowns refresh and your team follows up. You might even look to build this second if you really need it. Rabadon's Death Cap is your biggest power spike, massively increasing your damage when you're ahead. Void Staff becomes important later in the game when enemies start stacking magic resistance. There are also a few situational options worth mentioning. Storm Surge can give you that extra burst power spike. Cosmic Drives provides ability haste and movement speed for more mobility in fights, plus a little bit of extra health. And Lichbane can help with tower damage and burst combos. Sylas can even build slightly tanky items if the situation demands it, especially when you need to survive longer fights. For example, Spirit Visage is great against AP teams and massively increases your healing, which can make Sylas incredibly difficult to kill. And Randuin's Omen can be useful against heavy AD or crit-based teams. For summoner spells, Flash is mandatory. It allows Sylas to catch enemies, escape danger, and create outplay opportunities with his combos. Your second spell is usually Ignite for extra kill pressure in lane. I recommend this 90% of games. But against extremely difficult matchups, Teleport can be a safer option to survive lane and impact the map later on. Sylas's early laning phase is simple. Reach level 3 safely and preserve your health. In most matchups, let the wave push towards your side of the lane. Last hit with autos when safe, and start Q in most range matchups to secure difficult CS from range. Don't risk large chunks of health for early minions. Missing some CS is fine as long as you reach level 3 healthy with at least one potion remaining. Ideally, the wave should be frozen just outside your tower once you hit level 3. This gives you the space needed to commit to longer trades and fully use your abilities and passive autos as enemies retreat. After landing a strong trade and chunking your opponent to around 60% health, you can look for an ignite all in depending on the matchup. When trading, always respect enemy crowd control. CC is the biggest threat to Sylas early, so whenever possible, sidestep or use E-dash to avoid key abilities before committing. Sylas is extremely strong in early skirmishes, especially around river and jungle. If your jungler is invading or scuttle fight is likely, push the wave and be ready to move first. Sylas has strong roaming potential. Landing E-dash and then E-chain on a target will often force a flash or secure a kill. After level 6, roaming becomes even more impactful, as the ultimates available in other lanes greatly expand your options. Before roaming, quickly consider what ultimates you can steal and how they can impact the fight. You can even visit the lane, hijack an ultimate, and go back to mid lane. While Sylas can roam effectively, don't underestimate his tower damage. If your laner roams and you can't safely follow, push the wave and take plates using your passive autos. Early tower plates provide significant gold and help you open up the map once mid tower falls. Mid game is where Sylas is strongest. With 2 or 3 items, you have enough burst and sustain to threaten most champions. Look for picks and skirmishes, especially around jungle paths, river fights, and objectives. These areas favor Sylas because of the limited vision, terrain mobility, and the ability to steal powerful teamfight ultimates. Sylas thrives when enemies lack vision. Control wards and sweeper pressure allows you to surprise enemies with engages or powerful stolen ultimates. Even a single pick can open up the map for objectives. If your team is ahead, Sylas can also dive fights aggressively, using stolen ultimates, W healing, and defensive tools to survive while disrupting the enemy team. If the game slows down or you're slightly behind, farming side lanes is a reliable way to stay relevant in gold and experience. Sylas is strong in 1v1 situations, but side laning will often attract multiple enemies. Be aware of escape routes and use terrain mobility to disengage when necessary. Drawing pressure in a side lane can also create opportunities for your team elsewhere on the map. Sylas provides consistent damage with abilities and passive autos, so always help secure major objectives when your team has priority. Late game fights are far less forgiving, but Sylas can still decide fights with one well-used ultimate. Pay close attention to enemy cooldowns and positioning, as a single catch can quickly end the game. Teamfights often happen around Baron and Elder Dragon, where tight terrain makes it easier to land powerful stolen ultimates and disrupt multiple enemies. At this stage, the best ultimates may not always be available. Be prepared to adapt and make the most of secondary options, sometimes using them defensively to peel for teammates or control space during fights. Sylas remains a strong late game champion thanks to his base damage, sustain, and flexibility of stolen ultimates. As long as you choose the right moment and the right ultimates, you can still turn fights and close out the game. Most Sylas players don't realize how much damage they're wasting with certain stolen ultimates. Whenever you cast an ability, Sylas gains a passive auto attack, but this also works with ultimates that can be activated multiple times. For example, Ahri has 3 dashes. Corki fires multiple rockets. Teemo can place several mushrooms. Every single cast gives you another passive auto. That means one stolen ultimate can generate 3 to 6 passive autos in a single rotation. If you weave autos between those casts, the damage skyrockets. Same stolen ultimate, way more damage. This is why Protobelt is so strong on Sylas. Start with E1 to dash in, then immediately use Protobelt to close the gap further while adding some extra damage. Now you're close enough that landing your E-chain becomes much harder to dodge. E in, Protobelt, then land E2. Most players ruin their flash combos with Sylas. Unlike some champions, Sylas can't pre-buffer abilities with flash. If you try things like E2 then flash, the range won't extend. The ability will simply cast before the flash. But there are still a few useful flash combos to know. First, E1, flash E2. Dash with E1, then flash forward to massively extend your gap close before throwing the chain. Second, W, then flash. Casting W and then flashing is a quick way to secure the heal in clutch situations when you need to reach a target instantly. And third, flash Q. Flashing first lets you land a long-range Q finisher when enemies think they're just out of range. They're simple mechanics, but knowing these can make your Sylas engages and clutch moments much more reliable. Don't just walk up and steal ultimates on Sylas. Take them mid-combo. Enemies don't always know if you're already stolen their ultimate or if your R is on cooldown, so grabbing it smoothly during an ability can catch them completely off guard. One of the cleanest ways is during E2. As the chain is traveling towards the enemy, press R just before it connects. You're already locked into dash, so you steal the ultimate while engaging. Another option is R into W when you're already in melee range. Casting W immediately after cancels the R animation, letting you grab the ultimate and continue the fight without slowing down. And if you simply need to get in range quickly, you can always E1 forward and steal the ultimate immediately. Smooth steals like these keep the combo flowing, and often catch enemies completely unprepared. Most players hide behind minions when Sylas dashes in. When you use E1, enemies will often step forward and weave between the minions so your E2 chain hits a minion instead of them. One way to beat this is to wait until the minions are low health. Dash in and then use Q and your passive autos on the champion while they're standing in the wave. The AoE damage clears the low health minions, removing the block. And now the lane is open and you can land E2 at almost point blank range. Let them hide behind the wave, then remove it. 3 quick Sylas E tips most players overlook. First, E1 doesn't need to dash far. If you're already in melee range, you can cast it almost on the spot just to trigger your passive auto faster. Second, think of E2 like a monkey branch. You can chain to minions, jungle camps, or nearby targets to swing forward in chases or escape when running away. And third, use Fog of War. If enemies see your E1 in dash, they'll start dodging the chain. But if you dash from a brush or out of vision, the E2 becomes much harder to react to. Small tricks like these can make your Sylas engages far more reliable. Here's a small habit that can save you a lot of health on Sylas. When you throw out your E2 chain, try walking slightly away from the enemy as you cast it. If the chain lands, you'll dash in anyway, so the movement doesn't matter. But if it misses, moving forward often leaves you in range for the enemy to punish you with abilities or auto attacks. By casting E2 while drifting backwards, you stay in a safer position if the chain misses. It's a small adjustment, but it makes failed engages much less punishable. Sylas players often risk too much trying to get maximum value from Kingslayer. Your W reaches its maximum heal value at around 40% health. You don't need to wait until you're nearly dead. And if you're running Last Stand, that rune reaches its maximum value at 30% HP. So the sweet spot is around 1/3 HP, where both your W and Last Stand are giving maximum value. This is why your Kingslayer is such a powerful bait tool. Enemies see you low and commit to the fight, but one well-timed W can suddenly swing the trade or buy time for your team to collapse. You can also heal off clones. Shaco clone, LeBlanc clone, Wukong clone, they all count as targets. Even if you can't reach the champion, you can still use the clone to heal. Most Sylas players don't realize W can actually dash over walls. Kingslayer has a small dash attached to it, and on thin walls, it can sometimes carry you to the other side. But the target needs to be slightly away from the wall for the dash to go through. If they're too close, you'll still damage and heal, but you won't cross the wall. There are also a few jungle camps where this works very consistently. So when your E is on cooldown, remember your W can sometimes be the last second escape, or a way to keep chasing through the jungle. Even though Sylas ultimate is point and click, don't assume it's guaranteed. There are several ways enemies can block, cancel, or waste your hijack, and in late game fights, they can completely change the outcome. The most obvious ones are item spell shields like Banshee's Veil and Edge of Night. If you don't remove them first, your ultimate can be blocked and put on cooldown. The same applies to certain defensive abilities like Nocturne W, Sivir E, or even Yasuo Windwall, which can stop your hijack if timed correctly. There are also champions who can avoid point and click abilities entirely. So if champions like Fizz use E, or Elise uses Repel, your hijack will be cancelled. And be careful around clones too. If you try to steal from a fake target like LeBlanc, Shaco, Nico, Wukong, your ultimate will be wasted. There are even some strange interactions. For example, if Braum intercepts your hijack, you'll actually steal Braum's ultimate instead. So when you play Sylas, don't just think about which ultimates to steal, think about what can stop you from taking it first. Sylas has a small aggro interaction many players don't realize. When you land E2 or W, Sylas will automatically auto-attack the target. Near towers, this matters, because if you land your chain while outside turret range, you can still damage and knock up the enemy without drawing aggro, as long as you don't auto-attack them. Even using R doesn't aggro. The same idea can happen with Baron. If you chain from behind Baron, you can land the stun without pulling aggro, but the automatic auto-attack will trigger it. So sometimes you'll want to move immediately after landing to cancel the auto. Here's a quick Sylas laning tip many players forget. Just because your opponent hasn't reached level 6 yet, doesn't mean you can't steal their ultimate. Once you hit level 6, you can take their ultimate even if they're still level 5. This creates a powerful level 6 window in lane. For example, if you reach level 6 before an Ahri, you can immediately steal her ultimate, dash in to punish her before she ever unlocks it herself. It's a small mechanic, but it can make those first level 6 fights extremely important on Sylas. Here's a small Sylas tip that can make you much harder to gank. Don't just react to ganks, think about the ultimate you can steal. You should already know what the ultimate you want to take if the enemy jungler or roaming laner shows up. Sometimes it can even become your escape tool. For example, if a Volibear ganks your lane, you can steal his ultimate and use the long leap to disengage. Thinking this way lets you play lane much more confidently, because every gank can potentially give you another option to fight or escape. Sylas doesn't just steal ultimates, he steals roles. The easiest way to think about them is through 6 archetypes, each giving Sylas a different role in a fight. Engage ultimates are some of the strongest tools Sylas can steal. They allow you to start fights or catch enemies from range, often guaranteeing your E-chain follow-up. When your team needs someone to initiate, these ultimates instantly turn Sylas into the primary engage. Burst ultimates give Sylas access to huge amounts of instant damage. They are best to use to finish enemies after your combo or to heavily chunk targets before a fight. When fights are close, these ultimates can quickly secure kills and swing momentum in your favor. Mobility ultimates allow Sylas to reposition, chase enemies, and stay on top of targets during fights. They are especially strong in skirmishes where sticking to a single enemy is critical. These ultimates often let Sylas extend trades and guarantee additional passive auto attacks. Control ultimates manipulate fights by pushing enemies, creating zones, or disrupting positioning. They can split teams apart, peel threats away, or force enemies into unfavorable situations. Used correctly, these ultimates give Sylas powerful control over how a fight unfolds. Utility ultimates provide powerful defensive tools, such as healing, shielding, or team-wide buffs. These can help Sylas survive dangerous moments or support allies during critical fights. When your team needs protection rather than damage, these ultimates can completely turn an engagement. Transformation and stat ultimates temporarily grant Sylas new abilities or major stat boosts. These allow him to extend combos, increase durability, or deal sustained damage in longer fights. Used at the right moment, they can dramatically increase Sylas's overall combat potential. You won't always have the perfect ultimate available, but understanding these archetypes helps you quickly adapt and get the most value out of whatever you steal. Sylas itemization gets a lot more interesting when you start thinking about the ultimates available in a game. If the enemy team has champions like Ziggs or Lux, building Rabadon's death cap can massively spike the damage of those stolen abilities. If there's a Swain, pairing his ultimate with Spirit Visage can turn Sylas into an almost unkillable drain tank. Even Magi Soulstealer becomes much safer if you have survival tools like Echo or Kayle ultimates, and items like Liandry's can repeatedly burn enemies with multicast abilities such as Corki rockets. Different ultimates, different builds. Most players think Sylas can only use one ultimate at a time, but that's not always true. Late game, your hijack cooldown becomes very short, often around 30 seconds. That means you can use one ultimate to set something up, then steal another ultimate before the fight even starts. For example, you might steal Teemo's ultimate, place a few mushrooms around Baron, then once your ultimate cooldown returns, grab another ultimate for the upcoming teamfight. Or take something like Xerath's ultimate to poke enemies while sieging, then steal another ability once your R is ready again. Set up the map with one, then fight with another. A few ultimates behave a little differently when Sylas steals them. For example, Nidalee only gives you Cougar form. Champions like Elise or Jace, Karma is another unique one. You don't gain all of her abilities, but instead a single empowered cast. Here's a quick tip for newer Sylas players. You don't need to know all 170 plus champion ultimates to play Sylas. If you're still an ultimate and aren't sure what it does, simply hover your cursor over the ability icon on your ability bar. The tooltip will show the full description, damage and scaling, just like any other ability. Before breaking matchups down into easy, medium and hard, it's important to understand Sylas's core goal in lane. Your primary objective is to find smart trade windows while staying healthy enough to threaten all-ins when the opportunity appears. Early lane isn't about fighting non-stop. It's about identifying when your cooldowns, the wave state, and your opponent's mistakes line up. Once you build enough pressure or gain a level lead, you can start threatening all-ins, especially once ultimate abilities become available to steal. Sylas scales extremely well through levels, cooldown reduction, and powerful stolen ultimates. These are matchups where Sylas can generally find favorable trades and pressure the lane without taking major risks. In these lanes, your sustain, burst trades, and mobility naturally punish the enemy champion's kit. You're usually able to dash in, trade quickly, and disengage before they can respond effectively. Many of these champions struggle against Sylas's ability to stick to them or heal through their damage. Even when opponents try to trade back, your Kingslayer sustain and passive damage often allow you to come out ahead. Small trade wins stack quickly, giving you control over the lane and eventually setting up kill pressure. Mistakes are more forgiving here, and you're often the one dictating when fights happen. Medium matchups are skill dependent and situational. These lanes often involve skill-based trading windows, champions with similar burst potential, matchups that swing depending on cooldowns or positioning. Some of these lanes can feel manageable early but become harder later, while others start rough and improve as you gain items and levels. Execution matters more than matchup itself. Proper timing, spacing, and cooldown tracking usually decide who wins trades. You don't always need to dominate these lanes. Staying even while looking for smart opportunities is often the best approach. Hard matchups are champions that limit Sylas's ability to trade safely or punish his engage. This can be due to heavy ranged poke, strong disengage tools, high burst that punishes melee champions, or champions that control the wave and deny your engage angles. In these lanes, your goal shifts from forcing fights to finding safe opportunities and avoiding unnecessary damage. Key principles for hard matchups. Take teleport when possible. It helps you recover from rough trades and maintain experience. Avoid forcing engages when enemy cooldowns are available. Look for short trades only when abilities are down or the wave favors you. Use your sustain to stabilize the lane instead of constantly fighting. Respect range advantages and avoid taking unnecessary poke. If the lane becomes difficult, focus on farm, experience, and roaming opportunities. If you exit laning phase even or slightly behind, you've done your job. Disciplines and patience matter more than aggression. Don't stress if some matchups feel difficult or if you fall slightly behind early. Sylas isn't meant to win every lane through brute force. As long as you're staying alive, collecting experience, and looking for the right moments to fight or roam, you're playing the champion correctly. Manage your trades well, steal the right ultimates, and Sylas will take over the game. Sylas is a viable jungle pick, and in many seasons it's actually been one of his most popular secondary roles. We're not turning this into a full jungle guide, but the fundamentals are straightforward. For clearing, remember that Sylas has a lot of AoE damage. Your passive autos, Q explosion, and abilities all help clear multi-monster camps quickly, so try to position yourself so the Q detonation hits multiple targets whenever possible. You can also use E over walls to move between camps faster and speed up your overall clear. Where Sylas really shines in the jungle is skirmishing. Once you reach level 3, your ganks are very direct. Close the distance, dash in with E, and land the chain. And commit with your damage just like you would in lane. And once you reach level 6, Sylas becomes extremely dangerous in jungle fights. With so many ultimates available across the map, every skirmish, invade, or objective fight becomes an opportunity to turn the game with the right ultimate. So if you ever get autofilled jungle, Sylas is absolutely a champion you can take there with confidence. Sylas can absolutely work in the top lane, and the good news is that almost everything you've learned in this guide still applies. The combos, ultimate usage, and teamfight mindset are exactly the same. The biggest difference is simply who you're fighting. Since top lane is filled with bruisers and tanks, you usually run Conqueror and often max W first, because unlike mid, these matchups allow you to consistently land W in extended trades. The longer lane also works in Sylas' favor. Freezing near your tower makes it much easier to punish enemies with long trades, and your chain CC plus slows give your jungler extremely strong gank setup. Sylas top also has strong draft flexibility. If you pick him early, enemies often assume he's going mid or jungle, which can make it harder for them to counterpick the actual top matchup. He can also be a strong situational counter, especially against champions with powerful ultimates. Champions like Malphite can suddenly become extremely dangerous for their own team once you steal their ultimate. And remember, just like mid lane, you don't always need to dominate lane. Staying even and reaching teamfights is often enough, because that's where Sylas has the biggest impact. Sylas can also be played as support, but I wouldn't recommend starting here unless you're already comfortable with the champion. The early lane can be extremely punishing. Just like mid lane, levels 1 to 2 are your weakest point, and if you fall behind early, you can quickly become a liability for your ADC. Once you reach level 3 though, things open up. Landing E-chains into coordinated 2v2 fights can be very powerful, especially when you focus a single target with your ADC. And once you hit level 6, Sylas support can suddenly become very impactful. The right stolen ultimate in a bot skirmish or dragon fight can completely swing the fight. As for support item upgrades, take Celestial Opposition in most cases. It provides the tankiness you need to engage with an additional AoE slow. Bloodsong is viable too, if you want to focus on damage. So support can work, but make sure you learn Sylas in mid first, then come back and experiment with it once you're confident. And that's how Sylas wins games, not by forcing every fight, but by adapting to the ultimates around him and turning the enemy's team's power against them. If this guide helped, consider subscribing for more champion guides like this. I'm Zeus, and I'll see you in the next one.